You ever have one of those moments where reality feels so wrong that your brain just can't process it? That was me, standing in my own driveway, staring at the front door of my cabin mansion, and realizing my key didn't work. I'd been gone 3 weeks on a business trip to Denver, or at least that's what was supposed to happen. The client wrapped early, so I came home ahead of schedule, thinking I'd surprise myself with a quiet weekend on the deck, grilling steaks and breathing in that Pine Ridge mountain air. Instead, I got the kind of surprise you only see in bad movies. The first red flag? Cars. Way too many cars lined along my usually silent street. Pine Ridge doesn't do crowded. It's the kind of place where you wave at your neighbors because you see them maybe once a week, not because you're stuck in traffic with them. My stomach tightened. Then I saw it, smoke drifting lazily from my backyard. My mind jumped straight to the worst. Fire. Had my place caught? I broke into a jog, fumbling for my keys like that tiny piece of metal could solve everything. But when I slid the key into the lock, it stopped dead. No give, no click, just resistance. I tried again, jiggled it. Nothing. And that's when I heard it. Laughter. Voices. I walked around to the back, half convinced I was about to catch vandals or squatters. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. It wasn't chaos. It was organized. Designer tents, fold-out chairs, a literal outdoor kitchen complete with a gleaming grill that definitely wasn't mine. About 8 people lounged there like they were at some luxury campsite. And at the center, presiding over the whole thing like a queen at her coronation, was Rachel White. 45 years old, HOA president, perfectly styled blonde hair that never seemed to move even in the wind. I'd always known she was controlling, the type to issue violation notices if your grass was a quarter inch too high. But I never imagined she was capable of this. She turned, spotted me, and smiled. That slow, smug smile I would come to hate more than anything. "Oh, Ben," she said like she was greeting a distant cousin. "You're back early. We weren't expecting you until next week." I could feel my jaw clench. "Rachel, this is my property. Why are there people camping in my backyard? And why can't I get into my own house?" Her answer hit me like ice water. "Well, according to the new HOA emergency housing provisions we passed while you were away, we have the right to utilize unoccupied properties for community purposes during housing shortages." I just stared at her. Housing shortage? Pine Ridge? Half the houses here are vacation homes that sit empty most of the year. "And the locks?" I asked. "Oh, we had to change them for security," she said with a little shrug. "It's all perfectly legal, Ben. The HOA board voted unanimously. We've been staying here for 2 weeks now. Honestly, it's been wonderful." I could feel my pulse in my ears. "This is my house. I own it. You can't just move in while I'm gone." Her smile didn't even flicker. "I think we'll let the police decide that." She pulled out her phone and started dialing. I actually laughed. "You're calling the cops? On me? For being in my own backyard?" "Yes," she said simply, turning away from me. "You're trespassing on HOA community property and disturbing a lawful assembly." I don't remember breathing in those next few minutes. The other campers looked at me, some uncomfortable, some avoiding my eyes completely. 15 minutes. Later, 2 officers pulled up, one older, one younger. The older one stepped toward me. "Sir, do you live here?" "Yes, I own it. Deed, mortgage, everything." Rachel slid in like an actress hitting her mark, waving a thick stack of papers that looked disgustingly official. "Officers, I have HOA authorization for occupancy. This man is trespassing." The younger cop's brow furrowed. "This sounds like a civil matter. We can't determine ownership disputes." But Rachel cut him off. "If he can't prove right now that he has the legal right to be here, he's trespassing." And there it was, the trap. All my documents, the deed, mortgage papers, were locked inside the house they had changed the locks on. "My proof is inside," I told them. Can't you make them let me in to get it? The older officer shook his head. Not without a court order. Rachel actually patted my arm. Don't worry, Ben. Once you get this sorted out, maybe you can join us for s'mores tonight. I stood there, in my own driveway, watching strangers roast marshmallows where my grill should have been, and realized something. Rachel wasn't improvising. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment HOA stunt. This was planned. And if I was going, to get my home back, I'd have to prove it, without the one thing that proved it. You know what's worse than losing your home? Paying $80 a night for a hotel room when your bed, your perfectly good bed, is sitting empty inside a house you own. That's where I woke up the next morning, staring at a cracked ceiling and feeling my anger simmer under my skin. Rachel thought she'd locked me out physically, but she didn't realize the fight she'd just started. Half the night, I'd been on my laptop digging through HOA bylaws, state housing statutes, anything that might explain how this was even remotely legal, and I kept coming back to the same conclusion. It wasn't, not even close. The so-called emergency. Housing provisions she'd bragged about didn't exist, at least not in any legitimate HOA framework I could find, so I decided my first stop that morning would be the HOA office. Pine Ridge HOA headquarters wasn't some imposing glass building. It was a cramped space wedged between a dry cleaner and a discount shoe store. I walked in ready to demand answers. The receptionist, a nervous woman who couldn't have been more than 25, froze when I introduced myself. I'm here to see the minutes from the board meeting where you supposedly voted on emergency housing provisions 2 weeks ago. She started shuffling papers without looking at me. You'll have to make an appointment with Rachel to review official documents. An appointment? My voice was sharp enough to make her flinch. HOA records are supposed to be available to any homeowner who requests them. I am a homeowner. She kept repeating that line about proper channels, like she'd been trained to stonewall. And then, mid-argument, her desk phone rang. I wasn't supposed to hear the voice on the other end, but she didn't mute it. Yes. The Harlan situation is proceeding as planned, she said, scribbling something down. Rachel wants to know if the new contracts are ready for Phase 2. Phase 2? My skin prickled. What was Phase 2, and why did it sound like this had been mapped out weeks in advance? I left without the documents, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. That one overheard sentence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some opportunistic grab. This was a strategy. That afternoon, I knocked on the door of my neighbor, Mr. Peterson. He'd lived in Pine Ridge for over 20 years and had a reputation for knowing everything that happened within a 5-mile radius. His reaction to my story told me more than his words. Ben, that's impossible, he said, shaking his head. The HOA can't just vote to take over your property. And there's no housing shortage. Half the homes here are vacation rentals. Then he added something that made my stomach drop. Rachel's been asking about you for weeks. Your mortgage, your travel schedule. Even if you had family who could claim your place if something happened to you. Why would she care about my mortgage? My travel? Unless she'd been laying the groundwork before I even left for Denver. That's when I knew. This wasn't bad. Luck. This was a setup. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Samantha Wilson, Sam, a friend and the lawyer who'd helped me buy my place 2 years ago. When I told her everything, she was silent for a long beat. Ben. This. Sounds like fraud, she said finally, but the sophisticated kind. If she's been planning this, she's covered her tracks. We'll need solid proof. And it's not going to be cheap or easy to fight. I didn't care. Then we get it. Whatever it takes. Over the next couple of days, we started pulling threads, HOA meeting notes, board member contact lists, public property filings. And a picture began to form, one I didn't like. Rachel had done this before. The Johnsons, who owned a lake house, had temporarily handed control over to the HOA during a family emergency. They never got it back. Rachel's property management company was renting it out now. The Martinez family, they got hit with constant HOA violations for absurd infractions, mailbox slightly faded, grass too long by half an inch, until the fines piled up so high they sold their land to Rachel's company for pennies. The promised community garden for that lot never happened. Her son lived there now. She wasn't just a petty, power-hungry president. She was running a real estate theft ring, hiding behind HOA rules and the ignorance of homeowners. And then came the email. No sender name I recognized, no subject line, just one sentence. You can't defeat her without concrete evidence. For a second, I thought it was spam, but something about it felt deliberate, like someone wanted me to know they were watching, and maybe even helping. Sam had a theory. Could be someone inside the HOA who's scared to come forward, or someone in her circle who's decided she's gone too far. Either way, it told me two things. Rachel wasn't as bulletproof as she wanted people to believe, and I had at least one ghost ally in the shadows, but that nagging question wouldn't leave me. What was phase 2? And how far was Rachel willing to go to keep me from finding out? I had a feeling I was about to learn the answer, and it wasn't going to be pretty. You want to know what's worse than finding strangers in your house? Realizing they've been planning to steal it for months. That's what Sam and I uncovered when we finally got our hands on the so-called emergency housing provisions. Rachel had flashed at the cops. They weren't just questionable. They were completely fabricated. Professional-looking, with fake signatures from HOA board members who later swore they'd never seen the documents in their lives. This wasn't improvisation. This was a long con. While Sam tore into the paperwork, I started my own round of detective work. Pine Ridge is small enough that everyone sees everything, if you know who to ask. Mrs. Cooper, across the street from me, mentioned she'd seen Rachel walking around my property with a tape measure before I even left for Denver. Contractors came and went too, taking photos, making notes. She'd thought it was HOA business and didn't want to get involved. Then Mr. Thompson, 2 doors down, told me he'd spotted Rachel with a man in a suit. The kind of guy who looked more like a banker than a builder, snapping pictures of my house. That was a full week before I'd even told anyone about my trip. It was all falling into place. Rachel hadn't used my property for emergency housing. She'd targeted it, carefully, deliberately, like a wolf circling prey. And then Sam called me, her voice tight with urgency. Ben, I just found something in the county records you need to hear. Rachel's property management company had filed preliminary development permits for my address 3 months ago. The documents listed her company as the property owner and laid out plans to tear down my cabin mansion and replace it with luxury townhouses. I felt sick. My home wasn't just in danger. It was already marked for demolition. But that wasn't the worst of it. Sam also discovered that Rachel had secured a $200,000 construction loan using my property as collateral. Somehow, she'd convinced a bank she owned my home. The money was already sitting in her company account, ready to fund the destruction of everything I'd built. It was genius in the most disgusting way. Step 1. Fake HOA documents to justify moving in. Step 2. Create a paper trail of occupancy. Step 3. Secure development permits. Step 4. Get the financing. Step 5. Bulldoze the evidence, my house, before I could stop her. That's when my anonymous emailer struck again. This time, it wasn't a sentence. It was a photo. A close-up of what was supposed to be my signature on a property transfer document. Only problem? I'd never signed anything like it in my life. The forgery was good, almost perfect. But there was one detail they'd missed. I dot my I's with small circles. Always have. Whoever had faked my signature used plain dots, Sam thought. This was huge. Ben, someone inside her operation is feeding you proof. They know details only you would notice. That means they want you to win, but they're too scared to step into the light. We didn't have time to speculate. The very next morning, we had a meeting with Detective Morrison from the county sheriff's office. We laid it all out. The fake HOA documents, fraudulent development permits, forged signatures, the loan. He listened carefully, scribbling notes. But when I looked at his expression, my stomach dropped. "This is serious," he said finally. "But property fraud. Cases get messy. You'll need airtight proof and willing witnesses. And Rachel's never had a complaint filed against her. Officially." Of course she hadn't. She'd silenced or intimidated every victim. That afternoon, I drove back to my street and parked across from my house. From my car, I watched Rachel's camping retreat in full swing. Only now it wasn't just campers. It was contractors. They were measuring the lot, taking soil samples, unrolling blueprints across a table in my backyard. I could see it, the lines of the future townhouse complex replacing my home. But one of the contractors caught my attention. He kept glancing around like he didn't want to be there. When Rachel approached him, their conversation turned sharp. He shook his head, pointing at the blueprints. She leaned in, her smile tight, and said something that made him pull back. Within minutes, he packed up and left. I didn't know who he was, but I knew one thing. He didn't like what he was hearing from Rachel. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Heron?" a man's voice asked. "Mike Patterson. Patterson Construction. I was at your property today. Something's off. The permits list Rachel White as the owner, but county records say it's still you. If you really are the owner, you need to stop this. Now." It was the first real crack in Rachel's wall. Someone on the inside, willing to talk. Mike agreed to meet Sam and me the next day, and to bring every document Rachel had given him. But his warning rang in my head long after I hung up. Rachel was pushing him to start demolition immediately, even before the permits were finalized. She wanted my house gone, because without it, proving anything would be nearly impossible. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, the same thought circling my mind like a predator. If I didn't move fast, Rachel White was going to erase every trace of my home and my proof before I could stop her. Mike Patterson didn't just bring documents the next day. He brought the blueprint to Rachel's entire criminal empire. We met in Sam's conference room, blinds drawn, the kind of setup you use when you know someone might be watching. Mike looked around like he expected Rachel to kick down the door at any second. "I've been in construction 25 years, he said, laying a thick folder on the table, "and I know when a project smells wrong. This one stank from day one." Inside the folder were copies of development permits, contracts, architectural drawings, and, most damning of all, email printouts between him and Rachel. She'd approached him almost a year ago about redeveloping my property. Not if she got it, but when. She had timelines, profit projections, even notes on which HOA members she'd have to persuade to support her fake emergency housing rules. But the part that chilled me? My house wasn't her only target. Mike had copies of development plans for 3 other properties in Pine Ridge, all owned by people who lived out of state or traveled often. She was systematically hunting for vulnerable properties, stripping the owners of control and flipping them for massive profits. "This isn't just fraud," Sam murmured, flipping through the papers. "It's organized theft. And she's been scaling it like a business model." Mike's voice dropped. "You need to understand. Rachel's got friends in places you don't want enemies. Judges, council members. Her brother-in-law works in the DA's office. If I testify and this doesn't stick, my business is done." And suddenly, I understood my anonymous emails. Someone close to Rachel was helping me, but they were too scared to be seen. That fear wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Still, fear works both ways. And I was done playing defense. The next morning, I walked straight into Rachel's office at the Pine Ridge Community Center. She was behind her desk, hands folded, smiling like she'd been expecting me. "Ben," she said sweetly, Did you find a more affordable hotel yet? Cut the act, I said, tossing a copy of Mike's documents onto her desk. I know about the forged permits, the fake signatures, the loan you took out on my house. It's over. For a split second, her eyes flashed something I'd never seen on her face before. Fear. But it was gone as quickly as it came. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said smoothly. Those documents could be fake. You should be careful making accusations like that. Then she picked up her phone. Hi, Sheriff's Office? Yes. I have a man in my office, Ben Heron, threatening me with fabricated documents. He seems unstable. I actually laughed. Go ahead, call whoever you want. This time I'm ready. That's when the mask fell. The polite HOA president smile evaporated, and what stared back at me was pure venom. You think you can beat me? She hissed. I've been running this community for 4 years. I have friends in places you can't touch. You're nothing, Ben. And when this drags, out in court, maybe your beautiful cabin will have an accident. I froze. Are you threatening my house? She smiled. Pipes burst, electrical fires happen, and sometimes construction equipment just gets a little too close to the wrong wall. It would be a shame. And then, like she'd been saving the best for last, she added, I hope your friend Mike Patterson is careful too. Construction sites can be dangerous. By the time the police showed up, again, Sam was with me. She presented our evidence calmly to the officers, making it clear we'd be filing fraud charges within 24 hours. The cops took one look at Rachel, one look at the paperwork, and left without arresting anyone. But Rachel wasn't finished. As we walked out, she called after me. This isn't over, Ben. That night, I tried to call Mike to warn him about her threats. No answer. I tried again an hour later. Straight to voicemail. Sam and I drove to his office. It was dark, a temporarily closed sign taped to the door. My gut twisted. Had Rachel already scared him into disappearing? Or worse? Back at the hotel, my laptop pinged with a new email. No name, no subject line, just one sentence. Check the Pine Ridge Community Center security cameras from last Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. Tuesday was the day after I'd confronted Rachel in her office. What had happened at exactly 2:15? And why did I get the feeling this anonymous ally was spoon-feeding me the key to blowing this whole thing open? The problem was obvious. How do you get security footage from a building run by the woman you're trying to take down? Rachel had the system locked up tighter than Fort Knox. But if my mysterious helper knew the exact time, maybe they also had a way in. The fight wasn't just about proving my ownership anymore. Rachel's threats had changed. The game. She'd made it personal. And now I was ready to make it personal right back. Sometimes you pray for a break in a fight like this, but you don't expect it to literally fall into your lap. The next morning, I found a small flash drive taped under the driver's side mirror of my car. A yellow sticky note was wrapped around it with 5 words in neat block handwriting. Everything you need is here. I looked around the parking lot. No one. Just the faint hum of traffic in the distance. Sam and I loaded the drive into her laptop back at the office. The files were staggering. Video clips from Pine Ridge Community Center's security system. Angles I didn't even know existed. It wasn't just the hallway cams. Somehow my mystery helper had footage from inside Rachel's office. The first few clips showed Rachel meeting with 3 county officials over the past month. One from the building permit office, one from zoning, and one who looked alarmingly like he worked for the district attorney. They weren't chatting over coffee. They were leaning in, speaking low, papers sliding back and forth across the desk. But then came the smoking gun, a recording, crisp, clear, unmistakable, of Rachel on the phone, pacing her office. Accelerate the timeline. I don't care what it takes. The Heron problem needs to disappear permanently. I felt my stomach drop. Sam hit pause, her jaw tightening. Ben, That's not just fraud anymore. That's a threat. And if she's got county officials in her pocket, we're talking conspiracy, bribery, possibly even racketeering. I didn't need the legal jargon to know what it meant. Rachel wasn't just stealing houses. She was running an organized crime. Ring under the HOA's logo. The files also included audio snippets where she bragged about having insurance policies on certain judges, code for blackmail. And she laughed about past projects where she'd flipped stolen properties without the owners ever knowing until it was too late. It was enough to blow her entire world apart, but it also made one thing chillingly clear. Whoever was feeding me this information wasn't just close to Rachel. They were inside her walls. They had access to her office, her phone, her files. And they were risking everything to get this to me. Before I could even process that, Detective Morrison called. "Ben, we've been digging into your complaint. Turns out Rachel's been pulling this scam in at least 3 other communities. We're looking at 12 stolen properties in 4 years, total value north of $3 million. $3 million. My pulse kicked up. "So we can arrest her now?" "Not yet," Morrison said. "But we will. Mike Patterson's agreed to testify. Under police protection, that's going to be our key witness." Relief washed over me. Until the next morning, when I found all 4 tires on my car slashed in the hotel parking lot. A note was tucked under the wiper. "Drop the charges or things get worse." If Rachel thought that would scare me, she didn't know me at all. Sam filed for an emergency restraining order. She also requested immediate return of my property, pending trial. The judge agreed to both. Rachel had 24 hours to vacate my home. That's when she made her move. She called an emergency HOA meeting and pushed through a condemnation order, claiming my house had structural issues that made it unsafe. The paperwork bore the county building inspector's signature. Only problem? When the inspector came to verify the supposed damage, he found nothing wrong and confirmed he'd never signed anything. She'd forged his signature. Again, another felony. By the time the emergency hearing rolled around, the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker. Rachel showed up in a tailored suit, flanked by an expensive defense attorney who had the kind of smile that looked like it could sell ice to penguins. Her strategy was obvious. Paint me as a bitter homeowner lashing out at legitimate HOA actions. Claim all my evidence was fabricated. Accuse Mike of lying to save himself. And for a moment, I saw the judge listening, nodding. My chest tightened. Then Sam stood, calm as ever, and began laying out the facts. The fake HOA provisions, the forged documents, the $200,000 loan, the recorded phone calls, the footage of her meeting county officials in secret. Rachel's lawyer tried to have the recordings thrown out as illegally obtained, which only confirmed their authenticity in the judge's mind. And when the building inspector testified about the forged condemnation order, Rachel's mask cracked. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. White, based on the evidence, I'm finding probable cause for multiple felony charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, theft. You'll be remanded to custody pending arraignment." I watched as the bailiff cuffed her, the click of the metal sounding like a door slamming shut on months of hell. But even as they led her away, she turned to me, eyes cold. "This isn't over, Ben. You have no idea what you've started." For the first time since this began, I realized she meant it. This wasn't just about me. Rachel had roots, deep ones, and I might have just yanked the first one loose. And somewhere out there, my anonymous ally was still watching. You'd think watching Rachel White in handcuffs would have been the end of it, but with people like her, arrest isn't the finale. It's just the intermission. The trial date was set 6 months out. Sam warned me she'd fight every inch of the way, and she wasn't wrong. From her cell, Rachel filed motions, challenged evidence, tried to get the case thrown out on technicalities. Her attorney combed through our proof like he was searching for cracks to wedge open. Meanwhile, the FBI had joined the case. Turns out, The $3 million property theft Detective Morrison had uncovered was only the tip of the iceberg. Their investigation put the figure closer to $5 million. Stolen across 4 different communities with plans to expand. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got. Bribery, blackmail, witness intimidation. Rachel hadn't just been playing HOA president. She'd been running a criminal network under its cover. And then the anonymous emails stopped. For weeks, nothing. No subject lines, no cryptic sentences, no flash drives. It felt wrong. Like the one person feeding me intel from inside had vanished. Then Sam got a call from the FBI's lead investigator. "We've identified your mystery helper," he told us, Rachel's own assistant. She'd been working for Rachel for 2 years, quietly recording calls, saving files, and slipping us evidence piece by piece. When the FBI interviewed her, she said she'd been forced to forge signatures and file fake paperwork. She'd finally had enough when Rachel started talking about making the Heron problem disappear permanently. It was like finding out the ghost in the machine had a face. Between her testimony, Mike Patterson's files, and the mountain of physical evidence, the prosecution was airtight. The trial was shaping up to be a slam dunk until Rachel came back. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that made my backyard look like something out of a real estate ad. We'd decided to throw a small celebration. Neighbors, friends, even a few former HOA victims. I was mid-conversation with Mr. Peterson when a black sedan rolled up to the curb. The doors opened, and there she was. Rachel White. Only she wasn't. In a suit this time. She was in an orange jumpsuit, the kind issued to inmates, and she was walking toward my house. Everything went quiet. People froze, half in shock, half in fear. "Rachel," I called out, stepping forward. "You're supposed to be in federal custody." She stopped 10 feet away, her smile as cold as I remembered. "Paperwork mix-up," she said casually. "They had to release me temporarily." I didn't believe that for a second. But what she said next made my blood run cold. "You were more resourceful than I thought, Ben. But sometimes you win the battle and lose the war." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black device with a red button. Her thumb hovered over it. "If I can't have what I want," she said softly, "then nobody can." For a heartbeat, I thought she'd wired my house to explode. Sam was already on her phone calling the police. Mike Patterson was motioning his family toward their car. Rachel pressed the button. Nothing blew up. No windows shattered. No fireball. Instead, police sirens wailed in the distance. The device was a GPS tracker. She'd just called the cops on herself. She'd come here knowing she'd be caught just to terrorize us one last time. By the time the squad cars rolled up, Rachel was laughing. The kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. "I told you this wasn't over, Ben," she called out as the officers cuffed her again. Detective Morrison filled in the missing piece later. She'd escaped from a transport van on her way to prison and had been on the run for 6 hours. Out of all the places she could have gone, she came straight to my house. "That woman is obsessed," Morrison told me. "You're going to want a security system, and to keep it armed. Even in prison, she's going to think about revenge, as..." They drove her away for what I prayed was the last time. She rolled down the window. "Enjoy your house while you can," she shouted. "I've got friends everywhere, and they know where to find you." I didn't flinch. I'd beaten her once. I could beat her again. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling she meant every word. The trial was everything I'd been warned it would be. Long, exhausting, and vicious. Rachel's defense attorney walked in like he owned the courthouse. Perfectly pressed suit, silk tie, that smug half-smile that says, "I can convince 12. Strangers that water isn't wet." From the first minute, his strategy was clear. Paint me as the villain. A disgruntled homeowner with a vendetta against the HOA, embellishing events to punish Rachel for legitimate community actions. If I hadn't lived through it, I might have doubted myself. He attacked everything. The recordings? Illegally obtained, could be doctored. Mike Patterson. A contractor with his own legal problems, lying for immunity. Rachel's assistant. A bitter ex-employee out for revenge. And through it all, Rachel sat there, stone-faced. No smirking, no outbursts. Just that cool, calculated look that told me she still thought she could walk out of here. When it was Sam's turn, she didn't waste a second. She laid out the case like building a house, one brick at a time. First, the fake HOA emergency housing provisions. She put the real HOA board members on the stand, each one swearing they'd never signed or even heard of such a vote. Then, the forged condemnation order. The building inspector testified under oath that his signature had been faked, and that Rachel had never once contacted him about my property. Then, the $200,000 construction loan. A bank manager explained how Rachel's company had secured the money using forged ownership documents, and how the funds were sitting in her account, earmarked for townhouse development. Finally, the recordings, every word, every threat, every whispered conversation about accelerating the timeline and making the Heron problem disappear. Rachel's attorney tried to object. The judge let it play. You could feel the shift in the room. Then came Mike Patterson. He walked the jury through the development plans, the timelines, the emails Rachel had sent him months before I even booked my trip to Denver. He explained how she'd pressured him to start demolition early, before permits were finalized, and how that was a red flag he couldn't ignore. Rachel's lawyer hammered him on cross-examination, throwing every insult, short of calling him a liar, to his face, but Mike didn't crack. Not once. When Rachel's assistant took the stand, it was like watching a dam burst. She described years of forged documents, fake HOA votes, intimidation tactics, and how Rachel had kept files on dozens of target properties, including notes on when owners would be away. The prosecution showed some of those files to the jury. Seeing them up on the big screen, my name, my address, and the word acquisition scribbled next to it, sent a chill down my spine. By the time the prosecution rested, Rachel's untouchable aura had cracked. She still sat tall, but her jaw was tight, her hands gripping the edge of the defense table. Her lawyer's closing argument was pure theater. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a case about crime. This is a case about a man who cannot accept that sometimes the rules apply to him too. Sam's closing was quieter, steadier. Theft doesn't stop being theft just because you print it on official-looking paper, she told them. Rachel White exploited her position, her neighbor's trust, and the legal gray areas of an HOA to steal homes. This case isn't just about my client. It's about every person she's taken from, and today you get to tell her that her reign is over. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. When they filed back in, I held my breath. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Rachel White, guilty on all counts. 15 felony charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, theft. 4. The first time, Rachel's mask slipped completely. She actually gasped, like she couldn't believe it was happening. As the bailiff cuffed her, she turned to me, her voice loud enough for the whole room. "You think you've won, Ben? You have no idea what you've started." This time, I didn't look away. "No, Rachel. I know exactly what I've finished." They let her out, and I let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like months. But even with the verdict in hand, I knew one thing. With people like Rachel, the story never truly ends. The sentencing hearing was supposed to be the final nail in the coffin. Rachel's lawyer showed up looking like he'd aged 10 years in 6 months. The prosecution came armed with more than just the trial evidence. They had new findings from the FBI's investigation, $5 million in stolen property, 4 communities targeted, 12 families displaced. Rachel never once admitted guilt. Even in front of the judge, She spoke like she was the one being wronged, claiming this was all a conspiracy orchestrated by disgruntled residents. The judge wasn't buying it. "Ms. White, you abused a position of trust. You orchestrated a years-long campaign of fraud and intimidation for personal gain. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15. You could have heard a pin drop." Rachel's face didn't move. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just turned her head toward me and held my gaze until the bailiff led her away. That same cold, unblinking stare I'd seen the first day I found her in my backyard. But this time, it didn't rattle me, because I knew what came next. The FBI dismantled her entire operation. Her property management company was seized. Her co-conspirators, the county officials, the crooked contractors, even 2 members of the HOA board, were arrested. Every stolen property was returned or compensated. The Johnsons got their lake house back. The Martinez family was awarded damages for the lot Rachel's son had been living on. Even out-of-state owners she'd targeted came forward to reclaim what was theirs. I decided to celebrate the only way that felt right. In my backyard. The same yard where Rachel had pitched her designer tents, roasted marshmallows over my fire pit, and plotted to bulldoze my home. Now it was filled with people laughing freely for the first time in years. The Johnsons brought a cooler of drinks. Mr. Peterson manned the grill. Mike Patterson showed up with his wife and kids, looking lighter than I'd ever seen him. Even some of the HOA board members, the ones who'd been too afraid to stand up before, came to apologize. Sam gave a short speech under the string lights we'd hung between the trees. "This case," she said, "is proof that bullies only win when good people stay silent. Rachel White thought she was untouchable because she had money, connections, and the right to sign her name on official-looking paper. But in the end, truth and persistence broke her grip, and now Pine Ridge can breathe again." The applause was loud, but what hit me harder were the faces in the crowd. Relief, gratitude, pride. For weeks, we'd all been living under the shadow of one woman's control. Now, that shadow was gone. But just when I started to believe the nightmare was behind me, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. My chest tightened. For a split second, I thought she'd somehow escaped again. The driver got out. Just a delivery guy. He handed me a small box with no return address. Inside was a single key, my house key, the one Rachel had taken from my lock the day she changed it. No note, no explanation. I stared at it for a long time before slipping it onto my key ring. Maybe it was my anonymous helper's final message. Maybe it was just a loose end in a story full of them. Either way, it was mine again. That night, after the party ended and the laughter faded, I stood alone in my backyard. The air was still. The house, my house, glowed warmly from within. Thought about everything Rachel had said to me. The threats, the taunts, the promises that this isn't over. And I realized something. Evil counts on fear. It counts on people thinking the fight is too big, the enemy too connected, the cost too high. Rachel had been winning for years because people didn't know their rights or were too afraid to risk the consequences of pushing back. But the second someone stands up, the second you put your foot down and say no more, everything changes. I'd fought for my house, but along the way, I'd fought for every homeowner she'd steamrolled. And I'd learned that the real power in a community isn't in the HOA bylaws or who holds the gavel at a meeting. It's in people standing together. So if you're ever staring down someone like Rachel White, remember this. Document everything. Find allies. Don't let intimidation silence you. The system can be slow, messy, and frustrating. But when you keep pushing, keep speaking up and refuse to back down, truth has a way of cutting through even the thickest web of lies. Rachel thought she could take my house and get away with it. Instead, she lost everything, and I'm still here, Key in hand, door unlocked, lights on. Home.